Welcome to 30-question Famous Explorers Quiz. Which explorer is credited with discovering America in 1492? Christopher Columbus. He made 4 voyages across the Atlantic. Who led the first expedition to circumnavigate the globe? Ferdinand Magellan. He died en route, but his crew completed the journey. Which Venetian trader wrote detailed accounts of his travels to Asia? Marco Polo. His book inspired many later explorers. Which Portuguese explorer found a sea route to India around Africa? Vasco da Gama. He reached Calicut in 1498. Who mapped the eastern coast of Australia and New Zealand? Captain James Cook. He claimed them for Britain. Which Moroccan scholar traveled over 75,000 miles across the medieval world? Ibn Battuta. His journeys lasted 30 years. Which Chinese admiral led massive treasure fleets across the Indian Ocean? Zheng He. His fleet included hundreds of ships. For whom is the continent of America named? Amerigo Vespucci. He recognized South America as a new continent. Which Spanish conquistador defeated the Aztec Empire? Hernán Cortés. He entered Tenochtitlan in 1519. Which Spanish explorer conquered the Inca Empire? Francisco Pizarro. He captured Emperor Atahualpa. Which explorer traveled to China along the Silk Road? Marco Polo wrote The Travels of Marco Polo. Which explorer reached the Americas in 1492? Christopher Columbus, first European to visit the Caribbean. Who led the first circumnavigation of the globe? Ferdinand Magellan. Expedition completed after his death. Who first sailed directly from Europe to India? Vasco da Gama opened the sea route to Asia. Which explorer mapped many Pacific islands? James Cook, first to map New Zealand and eastern Australia, who traveled over 75,000 miles across Afro-Eurasia. Ibn Battuta visited 44 modern countries. Who led 7 treasure voyages in the Indian Ocean? Zheng He. His fleet included hundreds of ships. Who was first to reach the South Pole? Roald Amundsen beat Robert Falcon Scott by 33 days. Which explorer first set foot on the moon? Neil Armstrong. One small step for a man. Who co-invented the aqua lung and explored oceans? Jacques Cousteau pioneered marine conservation. Which explorer was the first European to reach India by sea? Vasco da Gama. Voyage took 10 months. Who explored the Pacific Northwest of America? Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Corps of Discovery. Which explorer is known for discovering the source of the Nile? John Hanningspeak, first European to see Lake Victoria. Who was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic? Amelia Earhart set many aviation records. Which explorer led the first circumnavigation of the globe? Ferdinand Magellan died before completing the voyage. Which Venetian merchant traveled to China and served Kublai Khan? Marco Polo. His book inspired Columbus. Which explorer is credited with discovering the Americas in 1492? Christopher Columbus actually thought he reached Asia. Who was the first European to reach India by sea? Vasco da Gama landed in Calicut in 1498. Which captain explored the Pacific and mapped New Zealand? James Cook, first to cross the Antarctic Circle. Which Moroccan scholar traveled over 75,000 miles in the 14th century? Ibn Battuta visited nearly every Muslim kingdom. Which Chinese admiral led treasure voyages across the Indian Ocean? Zheng He, his fleet had over 300 ships. Who led the first expedition to the South Pole? Roald Amundsen arrived December 14, 1911. Who was the first person to walk on the moon? Neil Armstrong, first to walk on the moon in 1969. Which explorer co-invented the aqua lung and filmed the deep sea? Jacques Cousteau, his ship was Calypso. Thanks for watching.